Thank you so much for joining us. The topic is an interesting one. It's something that takes a slightly different look at what we're facing right now. It's titled Elephant in the Marketplace, which had been written by Mr. Harry Doyle all the way back in 1998. It goes on to look at the model of economic development and question whether that model itself has some flaws built into it, which leads to imperfect markets and then eventually corruption. As I understand it, the basic premise is that the model is disruptive to an existing market and the pure profit motive may not actually work in a developing economy. Joining us to talk this through, Mr. Harry Doyle himself, of course, Mr. Dinesh Trivedi, and Mr. Sohail Seth. Mr. Doyle, let me start with you, and let me first ask you to explain the premise as you saw it back in 1998, and something that perhaps remains relevant today as well.
Well, actually, the title of The Elephant in the Marketplace was that we coined this in Washington at one of the World Bank summits where we were looking at how developing countries have to battle with corruption the moment you bring in the Western narrative of development, and how when corporations and companies enter new markets, there is this whole issue of corruption that pops up. And because the corruption is there, so what really happens is at the initial stages, there are champions that are designed to be brought into this market. These so-called champions end up becoming monopolies. And these monopolies are actually like big elephants sitting in a marketplace. So what they really do is they don't really allow market actually to happen in the early stages of development, if you want to call it that. So in the early stages, there is no development taking place. All that's happening is that these elephants are getting fatter and fatter and fatter, and therefore they become monopolies, and therefore we call them the elephants in the marketplace, which block the functioning of the market.
Just let's take that forward, Mr. Trivedi. Any thoughts initially, the model of development that's been followed? I mean, one could argue that there isn't an alternative model, fair enough, but then you start with this model, is the implementation the problem? Is it the creation of those elephants, as Mr. Doyle was saying, and perhaps not being able to prevent them?
No, first we have to understand two things. The basic thing, that if we feel that we are living in a world which is absolutely perfect, if democracy is absolutely perfect model, I'm afraid it is not. But is it the best? Yes, it is, considering the nature of human beings. Now, if you do not allow India to get their energies flowing freely, and if you have controls and licenses and things like that, then we have seen the result. So somewhere down the line, you have got to understand that Indian mind is absolutely a free mind. And we have seen in last few years, especially from 91, that when we really opened up, of course we created few monopolies, but there has been competition also. So whenever we talk about this big fat elephant concept, the elephant will not survive if he doesn't have fodder to eat. And that fodder really comes from expansion. Because elephant can only survive if there is market expansion. And expansion can only happen if there is competition. If we are going to limit things, then I'm afraid we are going to breed more corruption. I personally feel at the bottom of it is what? Is the rule of law. If there are 5 different sets of law, that if you are related to the Prime Minister or the Secretary, or if you are the party leader, or if you are the muscle man, then there is one law which is applicable for you. The problem here, I can tell you in conclusion, is of late, the bureaucracy, the police, everybody works for the party and not for the people. So that is where the danger is more, rather than a free competition with rule of law. And I think India has come of age, and I don't consider India at the moment developing. Otherwise, we'll remain all the time developing. It is now, I feel, a fully developed. And the benefit of this develop must reach the poorest of the poor. That is where the problem, that it has not reached.
Mr. Seth, initial thoughts are whether it's the flaws in the model or in the implementation of the model?
I think it's a lot to do with the people. We are basically a corrupt people. It's in our DNA to do jugaad, to do chori. So there are 3 things that have happened today. A, we are essentially a nation built by people or comprising people who want the easy way out. The second, we always think of twisted logic. In China, if they ask you, are you going to Shanghai tomorrow? The Chinese will say no or yes. You ask an Indian, are you going to Coimbatore tomorrow? His answer will be, I've just come from Bombay. He won't answer the question. The third, which is very interesting, is that everyone, every time gets away. I have a theory, which I will say, but I may maybe hauled over the coals. I think 2-3 things need to happen way forward. Number one, we need some level of dictatorship in this country. The second, start executing people. You know, we don't hang too many people for corporate criminality. Now, you might think it's radical, but trust me, it's the only way forward. Otherwise, you're only postponing the pain. And the third is start executing corrupt judges. But what do? Balakrishnan, one of the most corrupt Chief Justices of India, you've made him chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. We are a fabulous country for rewarding failure with greater success. So fundamentally, no one has fear in this country. No one has fear of the law. No one has fear of doing something wrong. And everyone believes they can, if things permit, get away.
I mean, the rule of law is, sort of relevant to what you have also stated in your article, because at the end of the day, whatever model you follow, it has to be implemented properly, and it has to be done in a manner where wrongs are punished and rights are encouraged. Maybe that's where we've sort of faltered.
There was a book, I think it was The Future of Capitalism or something, and the author happened to be in India. And I asked him a question. I said, what is your take on capitalism in the last 200 years? How come, if capitalism is so good, that time the population of the world was 6 billion, how come out of 6 billion people, almost 5.5 billion people are not really getting too much benefit out of capitalism? And how come the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer? So, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that there's some tweaking required to be done to this model. So fundamentally, I think corruption is a side, or a side dish, if you like, of the main problem. And that is the fact that the present structure of capitalism just doesn't work.
It's been widely debated, Mr. Tracy, over the last year and a half globally.
I would just, tend to agree with Suhail, but I agree with him. See, what is the problem? Corruption perhaps would be in many places in the country. But the difference is, if you're caught, then by God, you will know what rule of law is. Here, they don't give a damn. You can be corrupt, you are promoted. Corruption is rewarded. Righteousness is punished. That is the problem. Larger section of good people will keep quiet. And in democracy, if you just keep quiet and say, oh my God, there's so much of corruption, blah, 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 it doesn't work. You have got to come forward and fight corruption, not on the streets, but you have to fight intelligently, which is sustainable.
Don't you also fight the root cause among, yes, there may be a propensity of the Indian people to be corrupt, but there is social inequality which has been there for a while.
No, but there is no one else who's corrupt. We sometimes pontificate that, oh, others are corrupt.
Sure.
Corruption begins from us.
Correct.
I think, Ira, the issue is all about legal and demonstrable punishment for corruption. The reality is the nexus in our country is building to the detriment of our economy. If we don't recognize that, we are creating for ourselves a rat trap which we will find difficult to extricate from. So the reality is as follows. Either we decide that corruption is an epidemic that needs to be exterminated with alacrity by reorganizing our judicial processes, or we allow it to continuously create the kind of havoc it's creating. And it's across the board. It's across the board. And you asked a fundamental question, why is this happening? It is happening because we as a people, and I will say this with grave danger to myself, we have stopped becoming truly nationalistic in our endeavors, some of us. We don't care for the country as much as we should. In the good old days, our parents, our grandparents were fiercely nationalistic, which meant you did the right thing, you had the courage to do it. And then you had a support system. Today, even that support system has vanished. Because as Dinesh rightly says, if you're good, you'll be hounded. You know, let's pause and see what went wrong and why. If you look at any study of societal evolution or economic progress, embedded within that evolution is the desire to, question, to break barriers of ethicality and value systems. It's embedded in that. Systems need to emerge stronger after every such blow is inflicted on them. That resilience India sadly lacks. Number two, and I'm saying this without any cliche, I think the young of today, school children, something is going wrong with the way we are educating our children and the way parents are bringing their children up. Societies have to be built around the concept of fear. Fear for the rule of law, for being shamed and embarrassed. No one today is shamed or embarrassed. No one. You can do what the hell you want and get away. That's why I'm saying start executing people.
If we get Mr. Dhal, and Mr. Dhal not specifically to the point of execution, but the point of sort of rule of law and a much stricter rule of law, is that doable in a country like India?
We practice in India Western law. We have the Westminster model of parliament, and the people are somehow not connecting. The sense of getting justice, the sense of governance, the sense of oneness is perhaps not there.
The fact is, Sohail, if the rule was of law, and if every businessman who's doing legitimate business was happy paying a bribe, then how do you explain that quite of a big corporate sector wants to invest in Taiwan, in Bangkok, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, not in India? Because they are also fed up with corruption. And the corruption is now reaching at a level which is not funny. And that is the reason whenever the citizens see some ray of hope, they go to them, whether it is a popular movement on the street. Perhaps that is not the answer. And again, education. Indians are the best because they are smart. They have got brains. Look at any corporate sector in the world, whether it's Pepsi, whether it is World Bank, whether it is NASA. Look at the universities of America. The best of the students are from India. Look at MIT, Harvard. Harvard now, the dean is Indian. So Indians are one of the best, but obviously something is not going right somewhere. So they want the rule of law. But at the moment, the people at the top are shutting their eyes, and that is not the answer. Today, the bottom line is, I want to stick to power at any cost, doesn't matter what.
Yeah, I just want to add to the issue of sanctity of contract. I remember a very heated debate, and the investor, and that reality is coming back to haunt us again in terms of foreign investment. And the debate was, you guys don't even honor your constitutional guarantees. Forget about the contractual guarantees. Constitutional guarantee bhi tum honor nahi karte. What kind of a country are you? How do you expect us to believe anything? Now, with the frequent changing and flip-flap and the various policy judgments, one of which, of course, perhaps goes back 60 years, retrospective and all that, nobody is going to invest in this country. And everybody in the last 3 days has spoken about the fact that we need to get jobs for those 600 million people. We need industry, we need services, we need infrastructure. Who's going to invest in it?
Something you've written in the article as well, the whole pure profit motive. And that itself is cautionary and perhaps more so in a developing economy.
Yeah, as a culture, as a society, we are very caring, sharing, and compassionate as a people. We are concerned about others by design, by culture. But the concept of profit is that it's at the cost of everybody else. I don't care what happens to somebody else.
The thing is, when we talk about profit, profit is not necessarily a bad word, but profiteering is a bad word. So I think we have to distinguish between these two.
Talk a little bit about those solutions and we'll open up to the floor as well. Where do you see the solutions starting to emerge from? Does it have to start from the top, so clean up the politics first, then go down, or, as Mr. Seth was saying, perhaps there's societal issues that I don't even know if they can be addressed, but maybe one should attempt?
I think the the solutions really lie in setting examples, as Suhail rightly said. You need to basically have living examples of people who had options to profit here, who had options to do all kinds of things by having their Swiss bank accounts and sitting here and there abroad and whatever, but did not choose that option. It was by choice. You don't only need to do a top-bottom or bottom-top kind of cleansing. It has to be a gradual process, as Dinesh Bhai said. In the next 5, 10, 15 years, people will learn by example. They will see the merit. But setting a role model is very important. I perhaps differ from Sohail's solution of shooting down and executing people. Yes, one does feel a sense of frustration. One feels a lot of anger. But I suppose that's the choice.
See, you know, taking off, there's a very dear friend of mine called Eric Schneiderman, who's now the New York State Attorney General. And Preet Bharara and all were reporting to him. I asked him about the Rajat Gupta incident and what all happened. And obviously, in a conversation, he said something which has stuck in my mind. White-collar crime needs even more and greater demonstrable punishment, because it has a cascading effect on 3 pillars that make up any society: wealth, opportunity, and trust. Any society is built on these 3 pillars. The ability to sustain a society comes from wealth. The ability to make people aspire to their, exalted heights is derived from opportunity. And trust is what is therefore the binding or the glue that holds you together. When these 3 are lost, and that's why, it may be utopian. In my mind, it's utopian. We won't ever have people being executed. But I would love to see chairmen of companies being locked up in jail for 20, 30 years. When they are rigging markets, when they are fiddling with the stocks and shares, the person who gets burnt in countries like ours is always the poorest of the poor. The rich get away time and time again. So if you don't have demonstrable punishment, you will see this repeat itself with even greater vigor.
But that's where I was talking about. Again, the bottom line is the rule of law. And if there is no rule of law, then even jungle has some rules.
No, but
and
also,
we are not even in jungle.
Blame the bribe giver as well.
Absolutely.
That's the point that
this
Mr. Seth is making.
This politician saying, we are honest and all. The bribe giver, to my mind, is the bigger rascal. Unless the judiciary and unless corporate criminality is punished with alacrity and vigor, you will not be able to get rid of the elephant in the marketplace. And the elephant will run amok. You will then put down the elephant at greater cost and peril to a functioning economy like yours.
Mr. Dhawal, that's a valid point to make. You don't have to go to dramatic lengths, but it's very obvious now that corporate India has been getting away with bribe giving for years for their own profit motives. So you have to curtail that, don't you? I mean, you can blame the politicians all you want, but why only restrict it to them?
All I can say is that, there are 2 ways to live life. One is to fight 1 million battles and keep fighting them. And the other is to take the easy way out, as Suhail said. I mean, like, if somebody wants a quick telephone connection or is, gone past a red light and the guy comes across and takes out his book and says, I want your license and you won't be able to drive, and you say, yeah, chai pani and all that, people do it. That's the cultural thing.
But we have such amazing people, Ira. There are people, I promise you, while my anger is out of the frustration that the good in this country is not being celebrated as much as it should. We have remarkably honest people and good people, competent people in all walks of life. Remember, the poor in this country give more as a proportion of their income to charity than the rich.
But that's why when you open the newspaper, what you find? Bollywood, cricket, and rich people. These are the 3 news. There are good things also really happening in the country. But that is where we have got to focus. And if somebody has done some good thing, and somebody has stood by his principle and honesty, then I guess he also should be respected. If you do not respect, then I think nobody is going to get motivated with that.
If respect becomes a currency worth emulating, you will automatically decrease the corruption that exists. If respect doesn't become a denominator, you will continue to have the rascals that run the country as they do.
I
think that's a valid point.
In ancient Rome, the general who won the war, the biggest reward he would get is he'd get a building or a road named after him. And that is his greatest honor. Okay, there was no question of how much money he's made. There was no question of money. What did he do with his money? Nobody would even know how much
But
money.
now we have no
It's a
roads
great
left.
reward in India as well,
You see,
except that you have to pay to get that reward.
All have been named after Rajiv Gandhi.
See, the problem is there is a drought of morality. Today, a youngster, if he wants to look at the role model, then he'll say Amir Khan. His role model is different because we have failed them. And that is where we require role models. Earlier days, we had plenty. There is a drought, definitely, of morality.
But you know,
Can
you
I
asked
just-
about
And morality cannot be taught in school. It has to be taught at the parental level. Yeah, there was a competition the other day I was listening on FM radio that please tell us who said the best lie. Can you imagine? So I think somewhere down the line, the society also must understand that this is not on. How can you have a competition of people saying who spoke the best lie?
We need to wrap up this session. Mr. Dhol, why don't you close it off for us? Sum it up if you can.
I think at the end of the day, there is definitely a need to seriously look at this issue. What is corruption? What is acceptable? How do we strike a balance? We need to celebrate people who've done good. I think the takeaways from this particular session for me are, it's a difficult choice, but the haves definitely need to be more concerned about the have-nots. But I would also like to draw your attention to perhaps the need to look for more compassionate way of living. We all reduced the entire debate of the world to have and have-nots. Now, this was not so till 500 years ago. It was more about way of life, there was more about compliance, there was more about living life in the good way, the comfortable way, which was more ecologically and perhaps culturally harmonious. I guess the other takeaway I have is that you need to be much, much more aware of some of the things that have been said, that there's so many people who don't have the basics of life. What's going on in their minds, what's going on in their hearts, and I think it'd be smart as a businessman to be aware of that and try and make sure that you keep your profile and the way you interact with people accordingly modulated.
We'll close it off on that note. Thanks to all our
you.
panelists
Thank
and
you.
thanks
Thank
to all
you.
of you for sitting through.